My name is Diane Mensa. I am 31 years old. I am a logistics coordinator for a freight company in Houston, Texas, and I have spent the last 4 years of my life building something I was told a woman like me, from a family like mine, in a neighborhood like the one I grew up in, could not build. I own a house, not renting, not sharing a deed with someone else. My name, alone, on a piece of paper that says this belongs to you. I want you to understand what that meant before I tell you what happened inside it. I grew up in a 3-bedroom rental in a part of Houston where the landlord raised the rent every 18 months, and my parents absorbed it quietly because moving was expensive and disruption was worse. My father, Edmund, worked in building maintenance. My mother, Grace, worked part-time at a pharmacy and managed the house with the kind of precision that came from having very little margin for error. We were not poor in the way that makes headlines. We were poor in the quiet way, the way where everything works until one thing breaks and then everything is suddenly very fragile. I have one brother. His name is Felix. Felix is 2 years younger than me and has always been the version of a child my parents understood better. He is loud and charming and socially easy in the way I never was. I was the one with the spreadsheets, the savings account, the 10-year plan I wrote in a notebook at 19. Felix was the one who filled a room. My parents loved us both, but they understood him in a way they never quite understood me, and that difference is important to what happened later. I started saving seriously at 22. I had been working for 3 years by then, living at home, paying a small amount toward household expenses, and putting the rest away with a discipline that my mother called excessive and my father called admirable, depending on what mood he was in. I had a target. I had a timeline. I did not talk about it much, because in my experience, telling people your plans before they are real gives them the opportunity to talk you out of them. By 26, I had enough for a down payment. I bought a 3-bedroom house 20 minutes from where I grew up. The inspection took 4 hours. I read every page of the closing documents. I signed my name at the bottom and drove home with the keys in my coat pocket and sat in my car in the driveway of my parents' rental for a long time before going inside. I did not tell them right away. I spent the first 2 weeks fixing small things, painting the guest room, learning which tap had a slow drip. Then I invited them over for dinner and showed them the house, and my mother walked through every room touching the walls the way people do when something feels too good to be real. My father shook my hand and then pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than any hug we had shared since I was a child. 3 months later, I offered them a solution I had been thinking about for a while. Their landlord had raised the rent again. I had 2 empty rooms. I told them they could move into my house, live rent-free, take care of the place while I traveled for work, and save their own money for the first time in years. The only condition I stated clearly was that this was my home and the decisions about it were mine. My mother said yes before I finished the sentence. My father nodded slowly the way he did when he was genuinely moved but did not know how to say so. They moved in on a Saturday in March. I helped carry boxes. We ordered food and sat on the floor of the living room because the furniture had not arrived yet, and it was one of the better evenings I can remember from that period of my life. For the first 18 months, everything worked. My parents kept the house clean and tended to small maintenance issues I would have had to hire someone to handle. I traveled 3 weeks out of every 6 for work. When I came home, there was food in the kitchen, and the garden was watered, and it felt briefly like the version of family I had always hoped we could be. Then Felix moved back to Houston. He had been living in Dallas for 2 years, working in sales, and from what I understood, the job had not ended well. He needed somewhere to stay temporarily while he got back on his feet. My parents asked if he could have the 3rd bedroom for a few weeks. I said yes because a few weeks felt manageable and because he was my brother and I was not going to be the person who turned family away. Felix arrived with more bags than suggested a short stay and settled into the 3rd bedroom without much acknowledgement of the situation. He was between jobs, which stretched from weeks to months. He ate from the kitchen without contributing to groceries, left dishes in the sink with a consistency that suggested he did not notice them, and treated my home with the relaxed ownership of someone who had forgotten whose name was on the deed. I said nothing for a while because I was away often, and the situation was manageable, and I kept telling myself it would resolve itself when he found work. He did eventually find work, and then he met a woman named Sandra. Sandra was 33, pleasant enough when she wanted to be, and within 6 weeks of Felix bringing her around, she was spending most nights in the third bedroom. Within 10 weeks she had a drawer in the dresser and a spot on the bathroom shelf and the particular ease in a space that comes from having decided you belong there. I was in Denver for 3 weeks when my mother called to say that Sandra had essentially moved in, and was that okay? I said that was not what I had agreed to, and that I would talk to Felix when I returned. My mother said, "Of course, yes, you are right," in a tone that suggested she did not think I was going to do much about it. I came back on a Thursday evening in November. I had been traveling for 22 days, and my back hurt, and I wanted a shower and my own bed and the particular silence of a house where you feel at home. I walked down the hallway and pushed open the door of my bedroom. Sandra's handbag was on my bed. Her shoes were on my floor. Her cardigan was draped over my chair. I stood in the doorway and looked at the room for long enough that my mother appeared at the end of the hallway and said Felix and Sandra needed a little more space, so they moved her into your room since you are away so much. I turned and looked at my mother. I asked her to repeat what she had just said. She said it again with less confidence the second time. I picked up Sandra's handbag very carefully and placed it in the hallway. I did the same with the shoes. I unhooked the cardigan from the chair and folded it and set it outside the door. Then I went inside my room, closed the door behind me, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the window for probably 15 minutes without moving. What I felt in that moment was not rage exactly. It was something more complete than rage. It was the very specific feeling of understanding something you had been slowly understanding for a long time but had refused to name. My parents had not moved into my house as guests who respected what I had built. They had moved in and waited, without realizing they were waiting, for the shape of the house to adjust itself around their comfort. And it had, quietly, while I was away working, until the person who had bought the house and signed the papers and fixed the dripping tap was sleeping in the guest room in her own home. I came out of the room after those 15 minutes and found all 3 of them in the living room. Sandra looked uncomfortable, which I respected. Felix looked defensive, which I expected. My parents looked the way they always looked when a situation had moved past what they had intended, but not past what they were willing to admit. I did not raise my voice. I had made a decision in those 15 minutes that a raised voice would let everyone in the room focus on my reaction instead of their actions. I said that I needed to say something, and I needed everyone to hear it once clearly. I said that this was my house, that my name was on every document associated with it, and that what had happened to my bedroom was not a small misunderstanding. I said that I had made an arrangement with my parents based on a clear agreement, and that agreement had been broken. Then I said that I needed the household to return to the arrangement we had originally agreed to, and that if that was not something everyone could commit to, then I needed to make other decisions about the property. Felix said I was overreacting. My mother said everyone just needed to calm down. My father was quiet, which from him meant he knew I was right. Sandra said she would find somewhere else to stay and left within the hour. I thanked her for that. She had at least done one thing no one else in the room had done, which was take responsibility for her part in it without being asked twice. What happened over the following 2 weeks was the part that made the decision for me. Felix did not apologize. He moved back into the third bedroom and acted as though the evening had been a disruption I had caused. My mother resumed her normal routines and never mentioned it again. My father said quietly one morning over coffee that I had handled it well, which I appreciated, but which was also not the same as anyone addressing what had actually happened. I drafted the letter on a Sunday. I wrote it carefully and without anger. I stated that I valued having family close and that the arrangement had worked well for a period of time. I stated that recent events had shown the arrangement was no longer working as agreed. I stated that I was giving 30 days' notice for the household to make other living arrangements, and that I would be happy to help in whatever way I could during that transition. I printed 3 copies. I gave one to my mother, one to my father, and slid one under Felix's door. My mother cried. My father went for a long walk and came back quieter than he had left. Felix knocked on my door that evening and told me I was destroying the family, which I found interesting given that I had not been the one to put someone else's shoes on my bedroom floor. The 30 days were difficult in the way that doing the right thing is often difficult. There were conversations I would rather not have had. There were moments of guilt I had to sit with honestly and decide whether they were telling me something true or simply the old habit of shrinking to keep everyone comfortable. They found a rental 2 weeks into the notice period. A smaller place, affordable, in a neighborhood not far from where we had all grown up. My mother called it a step backward. I thought about what a step backward actually meant for someone who had been standing still. I helped them move. I borrowed a van from a colleague and spent a Saturday carrying boxes and assembling furniture and making sure everything was connected and working before I left. My mother hugged me at the door and cried again. I held her and meant it. Felix moved in with a friend from work. We have not spoken much since. I think we will, eventually. We are still siblings, and that does not disappear. But some things need time and distance before they can be honest. And right now, we are still in the part that requires both. My house is quiet now. I come home from 3 weeks of travel, and my bedroom is my bedroom, and the kitchen is the way I left it, and nothing has been rearranged or given away or decided on my behalf. I grew tomatoes in the garden this summer for the first time. I had to look up how online because nobody taught me. They came up slowly, and then all at once, and I stood in the garden on a Saturday morning in August, looking at them, and felt something I have only recently learned to recognize as peace. My parents and I speak every week now. The calls are shorter than they used to be, but they are more honest, which I think is a different kind of closeness than the one we had before. My mother said recently that she understands now what I was trying to protect. I do not know if that is entirely true yet, but it is the first time she has said it, and I am choosing to believe she meant it. I did not give my parents 30 days because I stopped loving them. I gave them 30 days because love without boundaries had cost me my bedroom, my peace, and 3 years of quietly accepting less than I deserved in a house I had built for myself from nothing. I know the difference now between a home and a place where everyone is comfortable except you. I made sure mine became the first kind.